Hello and welcome. My name is Kimberly Grymes, and I am a self-published author. And this is From Ideas to Pages to Publishing, a podcast where I focus on quick, informative episodes for both readers and writers. Mainly, it's me giving an update on my writing projects, followed by one or two recent author experiences, all under 20 minutes or less. But today's episode isn't about my writing updates or a recent author experience to share. And today, I'll be talking with editor Victoria Hopkins of Victoria Jane Editorial. Victoria focuses on development editing and creativity coaching for writers of any level of experience. Her services range depending on what a writer needs, whether it's a simple accountability check-in or a full manuscript development edit. There are many types of editors out there: line or content editors, proofreaders. I would even say that beta reading is a form of editing, especially if the beta reader is pointing out inconsistencies or confusing scenes to get through. But if that's the kind of editing service your manuscript needs, then consider a development editor, because that's their skill set: reviewing a manuscript for story flow, character voice, and other story structural details. I'm excited for you to hear my chat with editor Victoria Hopkins, so let's jump right into it. Okay, welcome. Today I'm excited to be talking with editor Victoria Hopkins. Welcome to my little podcast, Victoria. Why don't you introduce yourself and share a little bit about how you got where you are in your editorial journey?
Oh my goodness. Hey, I am so excited to be here. I love talking about books and all of the fun things that go into storytelling. And I feel like everything in my life, I kind of stumbled upon editing by accident. Like my passion just kind of like took me there. I loved writing. And that was something I always did like throughout my whole life. And then in 2020, I decided to like write a book that I'm still writing. But that kind of was the beginning of like getting into that world of like indie author and just like the writing community and all of that sort of stuff. And then a couple of years ago, I took a few courses in developmental editing, and that kind of was the beginning. And I just really love supporting authors in that sort of space. And I really like I've always been kind of like good at seeing the big picture of things. So that I feel like is just a perfect fit for the like developmental editing space, just to be able to help authors create these characters and like bring their characters to life in a way that readers will like just fall in love with, which is always the best.
So you are writing a book, so you know
Yes.
from experience that, the time and energy and everything that goes into it, which is also great because some editors haven't done that part of the sides, so they don't understand that part of the side. So it's nice that you have perspective from both sides.
Definitely. I think that that's something that is helpful of just like understanding. I think that helps just in general of how I give feedback as well, of just like really being mindful of providing like constructive, supportive feedback, but in a way that's not going to like make you cry. Because that's something that I've heard that from other authors, and even in my own experience of just not having people who can give feedback in a way that's like helpful and can kind of crush you when you're, especially when you're a new writer, of just feeling like this is something scary that you're doing. It's very vulnerable to share your work with someone. So really making sure that I create that space where they feel like it's safe to like show me their book, and know that I'm not judging it. Like I'm not looking at your book as like good or bad. It's just of like, how can we take what you have and like improve on it, or like celebrate what you are really great at? Because I find most authors they have like really like solid strengths in certain areas, and then there's like a couple things that are kind of like the theme of the feedback, that are just like naturally something that it's harder to do because there's so many elements that go into storytelling that I did not know when I started writing.
Yeah, definitely finding that balance. It's like you don't want to be too much of a cheerleader, but also you don't want to be too much of that critic. And so finding and that's like also individual to the author. So it's really, really great that you find that perspective there. So normally we talk about goals, but I think for you, I'd like to hear more about what services you offer. I know you mentioned development editing. Is there any other editing services you offer, or what else do you do for authors?
Awesome. Yeah. So obviously developmental editing is kind of like the bulk of what I offer. So there's a couple different ways that people can do that, whether it's like a deep dive, like full developmental edit, or a manuscript assessment, which is something that's not quite as in depth, but it's still going to get you with feedback. So I kind of like to have two options just for budget purposes, especially if you are an indie author, because you are paying for every single thing. So having that option is something that I really want to make sure is available. And then I also have been working with authors like one-to-one, just writing. I guess I call it writing coaching. I don't really know if that's like the right term, but like helping them kind of like workshop ideas. They'll come together, like they've got an outline and they're like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, how do I make this into a story? Because I find often like creativity thrives when you have that like have somebody to help kind of like workshop ideas with, or you can just like share your story and have somebody kind of like mirror back what you've said, and that can kind of like help spark things and stuff like that. So I offer like single sessions or like a month long kind of like container space where we're like meeting weekly and I'm like connecting with you, and really like that is more for like the accountability side of things, where because that's hard when you're staying accountable to yourself, of like having somebody who can come in and be like, hey, did you write this week? Or just knowing that you have a meeting with someone that you have to get this done can help kind of like get things going, because apparently, which is wild, is the hardest part of writing a book is actually writing the book, like actually writing. So
Yes, that
yeah,
accountability definitely helps.
definitely to have that. So that's kind of what I do. Like I just like having like, yeah, the creative process and helping people like bring everything to life is really cool to see. And yeah, I get so excited seeing all of these characters and worlds that authors create and stuff like that.
I really think more authors need to do that. Take
Mm-hmm.
that initial step before diving in and writing their first draft and talking with people. Especially when you have talking with a professional editor, you can get their perspective right off the bat rather than, I mean, critique partners and working with other writing groups is fantastic. But I have I guess as an experienced or an author who's published a certain amount of books, it's like, okay, now I want to learn more about how to do it before I write my first draft, you know? So getting that one-on-one with the outline and with making sure you're hitting those plot beats and everything sounds fantastic. And I think that's great that you offer that service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think that that can be a really helpful way. Just especially with like making sense of like obviously having ADHD. I kind of like am a bit of chaos. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of things in my brain. So I think having somebody there to kind of like anchor that can be helpful. So that's something that I am mindful of as well when I'm working with authors, of just like working with your unique kind of creative process and like figuring out how to like get the words on paper. Really, that's ultimately what it comes down to. How you do that is really your call. So yeah, just having somebody there to help support that. And I think a lot of us are like auditory processors. So like speaking can really help get like the creativity and inspiration kind of flowing, which is really cool. And it's really neat just to watch an author kind of like workshop that like scene that they've been stuck on, and then you're like, oh my gosh, that's how it needs to go. I've finally figured it out. So it's really like cool to see that come to life. And yeah, just help them kind of like support and make it feel less lonely, because it is kind of a lonely journey for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Oh, that's fantastic. I think a lot of authors would be interested in that. And if anybody, is wanting to ask Victoria any more questions, I will have all of her information in the show notes. But before we uh, talk about all of that, I wanted to jump ahead and talk about the experience to share. So every week I share an experience to share, or I ask the guests what experience to share. Or in your editing field, maybe you have a piece of advice that would help fiction writers with their writing.
Definitely. I mean, first, like I just like celebrating the fact that I get to like read these stories is just like so like, oh, this is so cool, so amazing that like authors trust me with their like book babies. Because it's just such yeah, it's something that I don't take lightly. And then I'd say like obviously editing, like I say, editing is definitely important. It's something that like investing in it is a really important thing. With developmental editing, there are options that you can kind of like look at if that's not necessarily in your budget. So that's definitely why I mentioned like I do have like an assessment where that's a little less in depth, but it's still going to give you like support. Or, I mean, utilizing like beta readers, alpha readers, critique partners, like a writing group, like having that sort of network and building that out as you're writing can be really helpful just to get feedback from like readers that are like readers and writers, right? Like often in the beta reading field, there's a lot of like readers and a lot of like writers and readers together. So that can be a really great way of getting some of that big picture feedback that you might not necessarily get if you can't invest necessarily in all of the editing. That can be a really great way of utilizing that. And then another thing that I always suggest is like when you're like going through your editing, because it can be really, really daunting when you're like, I finished the book and now I need to start editing. Like pick one or two things that you want to focus on through that edit of like, I'm just looking at like my descriptions and that kind of thing, or I'm just looking at my characters. Do they actually go on a journey? Like, do they like, does their like emotional makeup and all of their like the whole part of them, like, does that actually translate onto the page and that kind of stuff? And then another thing that I find really helpful is reading your book out loud, which can be a really great way to, especially with dialogue, because that one's hard to like have it feel like read like how we talk. Because a lot of the time, what is grammatically correct isn't how we actually speak. So it's that balance of like, how do I like honor the rules of grammar, but also like not make it feel stiff and like really inauthentic and stuff like that. And that can also help you as well when you're trying to like if you're writing like dual point of view of just making sure that your characters sound different, because it can be really easy to write like the same character and to weave in their unique kind of voice, um whether it's like the point of view characters, even the side characters as well, because that's how people kind of like get to know them, is through their dialogue or what your POV character is observing about them. So having that kind of like there can be a really cool way of just like making sure that they all kind of sound different. And yeah, I say like really just like trust the process and just know that it's not going to be perfect. Like it's never like it's never going to be perfect. So like really reminding yourself of that. I'm constantly reminding myself of that. Like no book is perfect. Even like the best sellers, like you'll find people that are like, I can't believe that they got a deal. Like it was the worst book I've ever read in my life. So that's like just reminding yourself that your book's not for everybody, but if you have that passion and that love for that story and the characters, that's going to come through. So really leaning into that is going to be key.
Yeah, I think those are all fantastic points. Reaching out, like especially if you're on a budget, which most of us are on a budget, and so trying to find the feedback you can where you can. But yes, so I agree also that you shouldn't skip any of the major editorial, and if you feel like your story needs that extra eyes before you start writing or anything during the developmental process, then try to see if you can put some more money into that. So it's all, this is a small business, what we're doing here. So you have to spend money to make money, especially if you want to put something out that people will enjoy. So I think that keeping that in mind while also keeping in mind that, like you said, not to be perfect. Every stage of the writing process, your draft gets better and better and better. And if you're stuck on one stage, it's never going to get to the end point.
Mhm.
So keeping in mind that it'll get better, it'll get better, it'll get better with each book you write. So I feel like that is also something really important that you mentioned.
Definitely. Yeah. Like the best way to become a better writer is by writing.
Yeah.
It's like so simple, but like it truly that and reading. Like I feel like those two things are like key to becoming like a better writer, especially when you're reading from the perspective of a writer and like looking at just how things are structured and not like breaking down every single line. But I find that now as I'm like reading or listening to audiobooks, just hearing how they structure dialogue or how they weave in like showing or telling or description or that kind of stuff is really interesting just to see how it all like plays out. And it's that stuff I always find really interesting. Whether it's in the genre I write or like outside of the genre, that can be another great way as well to grow as a writer. Just keep reading.
Yeah, definitely. Reading has always been a struggle for me. I have like a comprehension dyslexia,
Mhm.
so I have to really I'm a slow reader, like I have
Mhm.
to really pay attention to each line. But now as a writer, it's like I'm not only reading, I'm also like critiquing. I do that with movies too, so
Definitely. It's one of those things of just like it's hard like once you see the things and know the things and stuff that goes into it, it can be hard to turn that part off. But yeah, that's definitely why I've been loving audiobooks lately because it just helps my like brain like listen and then I can do things as well.
yes.
And like not actually sit down and read a book because I don't have time for that.
I know. I wish we all had more time in the day or the week, whatever. I really could use some more time. Um, Victoria, do you want to share where people can find you online?
For sure. I am on most social media, mostly active on Instagram at edits by Victoria Jane. That's my name across everything. I have the TikToks. I don't really use it. Threads, all of that sort of stuff. And then also you can find me at on my website, victoriajaneeditorial.com. And that's where, yeah, pretty much everything is there, links, how to contact me, all of the fun things. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Like,
That's good. That's a lot of places. Instagram is my comfort zone too.
yes,
So
definitely.
it's
I
such a
understand
great
it.
community.
Mhm, definitely.
I will always love the visuals and the pictures
Mhm.
and so pretty. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. And if you all want to get in touch with Victoria, I will definitely include all of her contact information in the show notes. So thank you again for chatting with me today. And I look forward to following you on Instagram.
Yay, thanks so much. It was super fun. And like I said, I love chatting about all things books and reading and writing.
It was so nice to talk with Victoria and to hear about the different approaches she offers during the early editing services, like creativity coaching and accountability check ins, manuscript critiques, and even full development read throughs. If you have any questions for Victoria, I'll include links in the show notes to where you can find Victoria via her website and social media pages. Reaching out and asking questions is the first step to making your story the best it could possibly be. Thank you again to my guest, Victoria Hopkins of Victoria Jane Editorial. I'll be back next week with more updates and more experiences to share. Until next time, thank you for listening to From Ideas to Pages to Publishing with me, Kimberly Grymes.